The sound of suitcases hitting the gravel driveway still echoes in my mind 15 years later. I was 18, standing in the doorway of what used to be my home, watching my parents load everything they owned into a moving truck. Everything except me. "Olivia, you're old enough to figure things out," my father said without looking back. His voice carried the same cold indifference he'd shown me since my sister Emma's accident 3 months earlier. "We've done our part." My mother finally turned around, her eyes red but determined. "Emma needs us now. The medical bills, the therapy, the special care." She trailed off as if that explained why they were abandoning their other daughter. Emma sat in the passenger seat of their sedan, her wheelchair already loaded in the back. At 16, she'd been the golden child even before the drunk driver changed everything. Now, she was untouchable, sacred, deserving of every ounce of love and resource our family possessed. "What about college?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "You promised to help with tuition." Dad slammed the truck door shut. "Emma's medical expenses come first. You'll have to take out loans like everyone else." "But I got into Stanford. Full scholarship for academics, remember? I just need help with living expenses. Figure it out, Olivia." His words cut through me like glass. We can't afford 2 daughters anymore. The cruelty of that statement hung in the air between us. Emma stared straight ahead, saying nothing. Not a word of protest, not a plea for them to reconsider. She'd always been their favourite, but now she held all the power. My mother hesitated for a moment, her hand on the car door. "There's some money in the kitchen drawer, maybe $300. That should help until you find a job." $300. 18 years of being their daughter, reduced to $300 and a house they couldn't afford to keep. The bank would foreclose within 6 months. I knew because I'd seen the notices they thought they'd hidden from me. They were abandoning the house too, starting fresh in Arizona where Emma could receive specialized treatment and they could pretend their other daughter never existed. I watched their car disappear around the corner, taking with them every photo that mattered, every family heirloom, every trace of the life we'd built together. They left behind broken furniture, unpaid bills, and me. That night, I sat in my empty bedroom with my acceptance letter to Stanford and a calculator. Even with the academic scholarship covering full tuition, I needed money for housing, meals, books, and basic living expenses. The part-time jobs available to college students wouldn't cover it all. I'd have to choose between my dreams and survival. I chose dreams. Working 3 jobs while maintaining a perfect GPA nearly killed me that first year. I cleaned offices at dawn, tutored struggling students between classes, and waited tables until midnight. My hands were raw from scrubbing floors, my eyes burned from studying under fluorescent lights, and my stomach cramped from skipping meals to save money. But I thrived academically. My professors noticed. Dr. Williams, who taught advanced economics, pulled me aside after class one afternoon during my sophomore year. "Olivia, have you considered graduate school?" He handed me a flyer for a research assistant position. "This could cover your remaining expenses and set you up for a doctorate program." The research position changed everything. I worked under Dr. Williams studying market inefficiencies in emerging technologies. My analysis of a small cryptocurrency company's business model caught the attention of their CEO, David Richardson. "Miss Torres," he said over coffee near campus, "your report identified exactly why we're struggling. Would you consider consulting for us part-time?" David was 35, brilliant, and building something revolutionary in blockchain technology before most people understood what that meant. His company, Genesis Crypto, was hemorrhaging money because they couldn't scale their operations efficiently. My solution was simple. Instead of trying to compete with established payment processors, focus on creating secure digital wallets for small businesses in developing countries. The market was untapped, the need was desperate, and the profit margins were enormous if executed correctly. Within 6 months, Genesis Crypto's valuation tripled. David offered me equity in the company as payment for my consulting work. "I can't pay you much cash right now," he admitted, "but if you believe in what we're building, these shares could be worth something someday." I took the equity, 10,000 shares at 50 cents each. It seemed like play money at the time, but I understood the potential. While my classmates were buying coffee with credit cards, I was learning how digital currencies would reshape global finance. During my junior year, I met Professor Janet Morrison, who taught international business law. She became my mentor and eventually my business partner in a venture capital fund focused on emerging markets. "You have an eye for disruption," she told me. "Most people see problems. You see opportunities." By my senior year, I had accumulated small equity positions in 12 different startups. Most would fail, but the 3 that succeeded would change my life forever. Genesis Crypto went public the week I graduated. My 10,000 shares were suddenly worth $2.4 million. I didn't celebrate. Instead, I used the money to launch Torres Capital with Professor Morrison. We specialized in identifying undervalued companies in developing markets, particularly those focused on financial inclusion and technology access. Our first major success came 18 months later when we invested in a mobile banking platform in Kenya. When the company was acquired by a major telecommunications firm, our return was 37 times our initial investment. But the real breakthrough happened 3 years after graduation, when one of our portfolio companies, an artificial intelligence startup focused on medical diagnostics, was acquired by Google for $800 million. Our early investment of $500,000 became $47 million overnight. I was 25 years old and worth more than most people earn in 10 lifetimes. Yet every night, I still thought about that morning when my parents drove away, choosing one daughter over another. The financial success felt hollow without anyone to share it with. I'd built an empire, but I was completely alone. No family celebrations, no proud parents bragging about their daughter's achievements, no sister to confide in about the overwhelming responsibility of managing so much wealth. I hired a private investigator to track down my family. They had moved 4 times in 7 years, always chasing better treatment options for Emma. My father had declared bankruptcy twice, drowning in medical debt that insurance wouldn't cover. My mother worked double shifts at a medical supply company, barely keeping them afloat. Emma had made remarkable progress. She'd regained limited mobility and was studying online to finish her degree. But the medical bills never stopped, and my parents had aged decades in the 7 years since they'd abandoned me. The investigator's report included their current address in Phoenix, photos of their small apartment, and details about their desperate financial situation. They were 3 months behind on rent and facing eviction. That's when I made the decision that would change everything. It was time to go home. I flew to Phoenix on a Tuesday morning in March. The rental car was a modest Honda issue, nothing flashy that would give away my circumstances before I was ready. My plan required precision timing and complete control of the narrative. Their apartment complex was exactly what the investigator had described. Faded, stucco walls, dying palm trees, and the desperate quietness of people living paycheck to paycheck. Building C, Unit 247. I climbed the exterior stairs, my heels clicking against concrete that hadn't been properly maintained in years. The eviction notice was taped to their door. Bright orange paper demanding payment of $4,800 within 72 hours or face immediate removal. I photographed it with my phone before knocking. Footsteps approached slowly. Through the thin door, I heard my mother's voice. "David, did you forget your keys again?" The door opened and time collapsed between us. My mother stood frozen, her hand gripping the doorframe. 7 years had carved deep lines around her eyes, and her hair had gone completely grey. She wore scrubs, probably heading to or from another shift at the medical supply company. "Olivia?" The word came out like a question, as if she couldn't trust her own vision. "Hello, Mum." She stepped backward into the apartment, her mouth opening and closing without sound. Over her shoulder, I saw my father emerge from the kitchen, coffee mug in hand. His reaction was immediate and defensive. "What are you doing here?" I walked past my mother without invitation. Their living room was cramped and sparse. A second-hand couch, a small television, medical equipment scattered on every surface. Emma's wheelchair sat folded in the corner, and I could hear her voice from the bedroom, talking on a video call with what sounded like an instructor. "I came to see my family." I kept my voice level, professional. "Though I see you're having some financial difficulties." Dad set his mug down hard enough to splash coffee onto the counter. "We're managing just fine." The eviction notice suggests otherwise. Mum finally found her voice. Why are you here, Olivia? After all this time?" I pulled out my phone and showed them the investigators' photos. Images of them leaving the apartment, grocery shopping with carefully counted coupons, Dad working his night security job at a warehouse. "I've been keeping track." "You've been spying on us?" Dad's face flushed red with anger and embarrassment. "I've been wondering if you ever regretted your choice." I sat down on their couch without invitation. "Turns out you didn't think it through very well financially." Emma appeared in the bedroom doorway, navigating with forearm crutches. She'd grown into a beautiful woman, her dark hair long and shiny, her face unmarked by the struggles that had aged our parents. She looked at me with curiosity rather than recognition. "Olivia?" She moved slowly toward us. "Is that really you?" "Hello, Emma." Our parents exchanged glances full of panic and calculation. They were wondering why I was here, what I wanted, whether I'd come to gloat or demand an apology they couldn't afford to give. "You look..." Emma settled onto the couch beside me. "You look successful." I was dressed simply but expensively. A tailored blazer, quality shoes, subtle jewellery that cost more than their monthly rent. The markers of wealth were understated but unmistakable to anyone paying attention. "I have done well for myself." I turned to face our parents directly. Stanford was everything I hoped it would be. The education opened doors I never imagined. Dad's jaw tightened. "We couldn't afford..." "You couldn't afford 2 daughters," I interrupted, using his exact words from 7 years ago. "I remember..." The silence stretched between us, heavy with unresolved anger and guilt. Emma looked back and forth between us, clearly sensing the tension, but not understanding its source. "I don't understand," she said quietly. "What happened between you all?" Mum's eyes filled with tears. "Emma, honey, maybe you should..." "No." I stood up and walked to the window overlooking the parking lot. "She deserves to know what choice you made." I told Emma everything. How they'd decided my future was expendable compared to her medical needs. How they'd left me in an empty house with $300 and a pile of bills. How I'd worked 3 jobs to put myself through college, while they'd never once called to check if I was alive. Emma's face went pale as the reality sank in. "You abandoned her? Completely?" "We had to make an impossible choice," Mum whispered. "Your medical expenses, the treatments you needed. So you chose to throw away your other child?" Emma's voice rose with disbelief. "How could you do that?" Dad tried to justify it. "Olivia was 18, legally an adult. You were 16 and needed constant care. We had to prioritize..." "You had to prioritize," I said, turning back to face them. "But you prioritized wrong." I reached into my purse and pulled out a leather portfolio. From it, I extracted a single document and placed it on their coffee table. It was a bank statement. Torres Capital Management. Current balance, $89,347,000 $628.14. The number sat there, between us, like a bomb waiting to explode. Dad's coffee mug slipped from his numb fingers and shattered on the floor. Mum sank into the nearest chair, her face completely white. Emma leaned forward, counting zeros. "Olivia? Is this real?" "As of yesterday's market close." I sat back down, crossing my legs calmly. "I built a venture capital firm. We invest in emerging technologies and undervalued companies. I'm worth just under $90 million. The silence was deafening. Dad stared at the statement like it was written in a foreign language. Mum covered her face with her hands. $89 million, Emma repeated slowly. "You're worth $89 million. Give or take a few million depending on market fluctuations." I folded the statement and returned it to my portfolio. "The irony is beautiful, isn't it? You abandoned me to save money on my college expenses. If you'd just helped with $5,000 a year for living costs, you'd have had access to this wealth when Emma needed it most." Dad finally found his voice. We had no way to know." "You had no way to know because you never bothered to find out." I stood up again, ready to deliver the final blow. "I called during my sophomore year when I was eating ramen noodles for every meal and sleeping in the library because I couldn't afford heat in my apartment. I called to ask if you could spare $50 for groceries." Mum looked up, her eyes red with tears. "We never received any call." "You did?" "Dad answered. He told me you'd changed your phone number and didn't want me to have it. He said Emma's therapy was expensive and I needed to stop being selfish." The accusation hung in the air like a physical presence. Dad's face crumpled as the memory surfaced, a conversation he'd probably tried to forget. Emma turned to stare at him with horror. "Dad, you didn't—" He struggled for words that wouldn't come. "I had them exactly where I wanted them. Drowning in regret, facing eviction, and suddenly aware that their abandoned daughter held the power to solve every problem they'd accumulated over 7 years of bad choices. The question now was what I planned to do with that power." Emma broke the silence first, her voice shaking with rage. "Dad, how could you lie to her? How could you lie to me?" She struggled to her feet, gripping her crutches so tightly her knuckles went white. "All these years, I thought Olivia had just disappeared, that she didn't care about what happened to me." Dad opened his mouth to respond, but Emma cut him off with a fury I'd never seen from her before. "You let me believe my sister abandoned me when you're the one who drove her away." Tears streamed down her face. "Do you have any idea how that felt, thinking I was so broken that even my own sister couldn't stand to be around me?" Mom reached toward Emma, but she jerked away. "Don't touch me. You're both liars." I watched this family civil war unfold with cold satisfaction. 7 years of buried resentment was erupting, and Emma was finally seeing our parents for who they really were. "Emma, please," Mum begged. "We were trying to protect you. The stress of everything—" "Protect me?" Emma's laugh was bitter. "You destroyed our family to protect me? You turned me into a burden so heavy it cost me my sister." She turned to face me, her eyes desperate. "Olivia, I'm so sorry. I had no idea what they did. If I'd known—" "Would it have changed anything?" I asked quietly. "Would you have told them to help me instead of focusing everything on you?" The question hit her like a physical blow. She stood there trembling, realizing that even with the truth revealed, she couldn't honestly say she would have sacrificed her recovery for my education. She struggled with the impossible choice. "I don't know. I was 16 and scared and in pain every day. I needed them. And I needed them too." I pulled out my phone and showed her photos I'd saved from my college years. This is me during finals week sophomore year. I'd been working a 36-hour shift and hadn't eaten in 2 days because I had to choose between food and textbooks. The photo showed me asleep in the library, my face gaunt from malnutrition, my clothes hanging loose from dramatic weight loss. Emma covered her mouth in horror. This is where I lived junior year. The next photo showed a converted storage room I'd rented for $200 a month. No windows, barely enough space for a mattress on the floor. The landlord wasn't supposed to rent it to tenants, but I couldn't afford anything else. Dad finally found his voice. "Olivia, we didn't know it was that bad because you chose not to know." I put my phone away. When you make a choice like that, you don't get to claim ignorance about the consequences. Emma sank back onto the couch, overwhelmed by the weight of what she'd learned. What can we do? How can we possibly make this right? I walked to their window and looked out at the parking lot, where broken cars sat next to dumpsters overflowing with garbage. You can't make it right, Emma. Some things can't be undone. "But you came here," Mom said desperately. "You must want something from us. Money? An apology? Tell us what you need." I turned back to face them, and for the first time since arriving, I smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. "I don't need anything from you. I came here to show you exactly what your choice cost you." I picked up the eviction notice from where I placed it on their coffee table. "You're about to be homeless. Emma's medical equipment rental costs $4,000 a month. Dad's warehouse job barely covers groceries. And Mum's overtime doesn't even touch the debt you've accumulated." I pulled out my phone and showed them another document, a detailed financial analysis I'd commissioned. "You owe $127,000 in medical debt, $18,000 in credit card balances, and you're 3 months behind on everything. Your credit is destroyed. Emma will lose access to her physical therapy because you can't afford the co-pays." The numbers hit them like bullets. Mum started crying again, and Dad slumped against the wall as if his legs couldn't support him anymore. "But here's the beautiful part," I continued. "I could solve all of this with pocket change. Your entire debt load is less than I spend on business lunches in a year." Emma looked up at me with sudden hope. "Would you? Would you help us?" "Why would I do that?" I asked. "When I needed help, you all made it very clear that family loyalty only flows one direction." "Because we're still family," Emma said desperately. "Because I'm your sister, and I love you, and I'm sorry for what they did." "Are we family?" I pulled out another document from my portfolio. "This is a legal name change certificate. I'm no longer Olivia Torres. I'm Olivia Richardson now. I took my business partner David's last name when we married 2 years ago." The revelation hit Emma like a slap. You're married. You got married and didn't tell us?" "Tell you what, I tried to maintain contact. Dad made sure that was impossible." I showed them wedding photos on my phone, a beautiful ceremony in Napa Valley, surrounded by friends and colleagues who'd become my chosen family. David walked me down the aisle because I didn't have a father willing to do it. Mum sobbed openly now, realising she'd missed her daughter's wedding because of their choices 7 years ago. "You have grandchildren you'll never meet," I continued mercilessly. "Twin boys 3 months old. David and I named them after the professors who became my real family when you abandoned me." Emma's face crumpled. "Grandchildren? Mum, Dad, you have grandsons? And you threw that away?" Dad slid down the wall until he was sitting on the floor, his head in his hands. "We destroyed everything. God help us, we destroyed everything." I put my phone away and checked my watch. "My flight leaves in 4 hours. I have a board meeting tomorrow morning and a charity gala tomorrow night where we're donating more money than you'll see in your lifetimes." "Please," Emma whispered, "please don't leave like this. There has to be something we can do." I looked at my sister, really looked at her for the first time since arriving. She was beautiful, intelligent, and genuinely devastated by what she'd learned. But she was also the reason our parents had made their choice 7 years ago. "There is something you can do," I said finally. All three of them looked up with desperate hope. You can live with the consequences of your choice exactly like I had to live with mine. I walked toward the door. The difference is, my consequences made me rich and powerful. Yours are about to make you homeless. I paused at the door, my hand on the knob. Oh, and Emma? When you're sleeping in your car next week, remember that this could have been avoided if you'd spoken up just once in 7 years to ask what happened to your sister. The door closed behind me with a soft click, leaving my family to face the reality they had created. But as I walked down those concrete stairs, I realized my victory felt hollow. Revenge was supposed to be satisfying. Instead, it just felt empty. I sat in my rental car for 20 minutes, staring at their apartment building through the windshield. The engine was running, air conditioning fighting the Arizona heat, but I couldn't bring myself to drive away. Inside that crumbling building, my family was falling apart, and I was the one holding the hammer. My phone buzzed with a text from David. How did it go? Boys are asking when Mama comes home. I stared at the message, thinking about my sons who would never know their grandparents because of choices made before they were born. Alexander and Benjamin Richardson, named after the professors who'd guided me when my real family had failed me. A movement in the apartment complex caught my eye. Emma appeared on the second-floor walkway, navigating carefully with her crutches. She was leaving. At first, I thought she was running away from the confrontation, but then I saw her destination. She was coming to find me. I rolled down the window as she approached the car, her face streaked with tears but determined. I knew you hadn't left yet, she said breathlessly. I saw your car from the window. What do you want, Emma? To tell you something our parents will never have the courage to say. She leaned against the car door, exhausted from the walk. You're right. About everything. What they did to you was unforgivable. I kept my hands on the steering wheel, not trusting myself to look at her directly. I've been thinking about what you said, about whether I would have spoken up if I'd known the truth. Her voice cracked. I want to believe I would have, but honestly, I was so scared and in so much pain that I probably would have let them do anything if it meant I could walk again. The honesty in her admission surprised me. I'd expected denials or excuses. I was 16 and selfish and terrified, she continued, but I'm not 16 anymore, and I can see clearly now what you sacrificed for my recovery. You didn't just lose your family, you lost your childhood, your sense of security, everything that makes a person feel loved and wanted. I finally turned to look at her. Why are you telling me this? Because I need you to know that I understand, and because what I'm about to do next is my choice, not theirs. She pulled out her phone and showed me a social media post she'd just published. The caption read, 7 years ago, my parents abandoned my sister to pay for my medical care. Today, I learned that my sister became a millionaire while I was recovering, and my parents actively prevented her from contacting us. I'm sharing this because the world needs to know what real sacrifice looks like, and it wasn't mine. The post included photos of both of us as children, my bank statement, and a detailed account of what our parents had done. It was already gaining traction, dozens of shares and comments pouring in. Emma, what have you done? I've told the truth. She looked back toward the apartment. They destroyed our family to save me, but they never asked if I wanted to be saved at that cost. Now, everyone will know what they chose and what you achieved despite them. I stared at the post, watching the share count climb. Emma had just publicly humiliated our parents and exposed their financial desperation to the world. This will ruin them, I said quietly. They ruined themselves, and they ruined you, and they ruined us. She wiped her eyes. I can't fix what they did, but I can make sure they face the consequences publicly instead of hiding behind closed doors. My phone rang. David's name appeared on the screen. "Take it," Emma said. "I'll wait." I answered the call. "Hey, Olivia, I just saw something online. Someone posted about you and your family situation. Is everything okay?" I looked at Emma, who was watching me with an expression I couldn't read. "It's complicated. Can I call you back?" "Of course, but, honey, whatever happened in the past, you have a new family now. Alexander just said mama for the first time. I recorded it for you." The call ended, and I sat there thinking about my sons, who would say their first words and take their first steps surrounded by love and security. Everything I'd been denied, I was giving to them. "You have kids," Emma said softly. "I heard him mention their names. Twin boys, 3 months old. I'm their aunt, and I'll never meet them because of what our parents did." She smiled sadly. "That's probably the worst consequence of all. Not the debt or the eviction or the public humiliation. It's knowing that there are 2 little boys who will grow up without knowing they have an aunt who would have loved them completely." Something shifted inside me as she spoke. For 7 years, I'd focused on my parents' betrayal and my own survival. But Emma was right. The real tragedy wasn't just what they'd done to me. It was what they'd stolen from future generations. "What's your plan now?" I asked. "I don't have one. I'm probably going to lose my physical therapy, which means my mobility will deteriorate. Mum and Dad will blame themselves, which they should. We'll probably end up in some homeless shelter or living in the car." She shrugged. "But at least now everyone knows the truth." I made a decision that surprised even me. "Get in the car." "What?" "Get in the car, Emma. We're going back upstairs." She climbed into the passenger seat, confusion written across her face. "What are you doing?" "Something I didn't plan on doing." I turned off the engine. "I'm going to offer them a deal." We rode the elevator to the 2nd floor in silence. When we knocked on the apartment door, Mum answered immediately. She'd probably been watching from the window. "Olivia, you came back?" I walked past her into the living room where Dad still sat on the floor, his face buried in his hands. The eviction notice lay crumpled beside him. "I have a proposition," I announced. Dad looked up, hope flickering in his eyes for the first time since I'd arrived. "I will pay off all your debts. I will buy you a house in a good neighbourhood with wheelchair accessibility for Emma. I will set up a trust fund for Emma's ongoing medical care. I will give you more money than you can spend in your lifetimes." The silence was deafening. "But," I continued, "there are conditions, non-negotiable conditions." "Anything," Mum whispered. "We'll agree to anything. First, you will both attend family therapy for 2 years. Professional counselling to understand why you made the choices you did and how to rebuild relationships you've destroyed." They nodded frantically. "Second, you will write detailed apology letters to me, not asking for forgiveness, but acknowledging specifically what you did wrong and how it affected me. These letters will be notarized and become part of the legal agreement." "Yes, of course," Dad said. "Third, you will volunteer 20 hours per week at organisations that help abandoned or homeless youth. You will see firsthand what happens to children who don't have family support." "We can do that," Mum agreed. "And finally," I paused for effect, "you will legally change your last names to Richardson. You will become part of my family on my terms, not the other way around." The final condition hit them like a physical blow. Changing their names meant acknowledging that I was now the head of this family, that their choices had cost them the right to define our relationships. "You want us to take your married name?" Dad asked quietly. "I want you to earn the right to be connected to me again, starting from zero, proving that you understand who has the power now and who makes the decisions about how this family functions going forward." Emma reached over and took my hand. "Those are fair conditions." Mum and Dad looked at each other, having a silent conversation about pride versus survival. Finally, Dad nodded. We accept your terms. I pulled out my phone and called my attorney. James, it's Olivia. I need you to draft a family reconciliation agreement with very specific terms. Yes, I'll hold. As I waited for my lawyer to return to the line, I looked around at my family, broken, humbled, but still breathing, still capable of change. One more thing, I added. My sons will know their grandparents and their aunt, but they will know the true story of this family, age appropriately, so they understand that love and loyalty must be earned and maintained. Emma squeezed my hand. Thank you for giving us a chance to earn it. I smiled at her, the first genuine smile I'd felt all day. Don't thank me yet. Earning your way back into my life is going to be the hardest thing you've ever done. But for the first time in 7 years, I felt like we might actually be able to build something worth calling a family.